In the immortal words of the classic movie The Incredibles, if everyone is special, no one is. Likewise, if everyone's an anti-Semitic piece of garbage Jew-hating creep, then it's not just Democrat Congresswomen Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Occasional-Cortex, and the entire Democrat media establishment that is protecting them by pretending the problem is on both sides of the aisle. It ain't. It's the Democrats, especially the new left of left-wing Democrats. They hate Jews, and the Republicans don't. And guess what else? Hating Jews is not the same as criticizing Islamists for oppressing women, killing infidels, and trying to occupy and destroy the West. Anti-Semitism is not the same as opposing illegal immigration. Anti-Semitism is not the same as holding the opinion that homosexuality is a sin. Anti-Semitism is special. It's unique in Western history and unique in the Western mind, and it's especially awful and dangerous to everything we hold dear and everything good and noble about the human condition. It's no accident that the great civilization of Europe ended with a Holocaust. It wasn't a Holocaust of hate. It wasn't a Holocaust against the other, a Holocaust specifically designed to eliminate the Jews. That kind of anti-Semitism is on the rise, and the Democrats specifically express it and tolerate it. When former DNC second-in-command Keith Ellison and the Black Caucus unapologetically hang out with a jerk like Louis Farrakhan, and when Israel, of all nations, must defend its very existence from BDS supporters like Omar Ilhan and Rashida Tlaib. Yes, you can disagree with Israel. Yes, you can criticize a person who happens to be a Jew. You can even argue against the tenets of Judaism if you know what you're talking about. But genuine Jew hating is flaming garbage from the burning dumpster of garbage hearts, and it's a Democrat problem, and they ought to take care of it. This is a thing, obviously, has really got me annoyed here. Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman, she keeps making these remarks about Israel that are just tinged with anti-Semitic rhetoric. Okay, you know, she says it's all about the Benjamins, and then she says that she's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, right? So she says I should not be expected to pledge support or allegiance to a foreign country, which is an old canard about the Jews that they can't be good citizens because their first allegiance is to Judaism or to Israel. I mean, this used to say the same thing about Catholics, that it was their allegiance, that their allegiance was going to be to the Pope. That's why they couldn't vote in England. All right. So the Democrats make a move to try and condemn this, like they did with Steve King. Remember, Steve King made some remarks that were taken to be bigoted. They condemned the remarks without naming him, but they then threw him off his committee post. Okay. The Democrats start to have a condemnation of anti-Semitism. It's supposed to come up for a vote tomorrow, I think. And suddenly it's a debate. Wait a minute, you're condemning anti-Semitism? Well, that's not the way we Democrats behave. The new young leftists are rallying around Congresswoman Omar and saying, you know, that she should be allowed to say these things. She's just attacking Israel. She's just criticizing Israel. And therefore, we need to put all this other stuff in this condemnation. Let's also condemn, anti-Muslim statements. Let's also condemn homophobia, all this stuff. And all of the young Democrats are basically looking to dilute this from what it's supposed to be, because anti-Semitism, look, I've said this a million times, I won't go into it forever, but anti-Semitism is the worm at the core of the Western apple. It is a hatred of God. It's a hatred, the Western civilization is built from a classical tradition and the Jewish tradition that comes to us through Jesus, the Christian tradition. Those two things, it's as if they're at war with one another, because the classical tradition came along with a paganism that killed its children, that worshipped stuff, and the Jewish God wants you to be free. That's a very big theme in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Jewish God wants you to be free. He gives dignity to the human being. He gives dignity to the poor and the weak and the small. And people hate that God. They hate that God because they hate his creation. They hate his creation because they hate themselves. This is run through Western civilization. I don't attack any specific religion, but I do attack Christianity, because Christianity, this was the worm in the core of Christianity. It was an anti-Christian belief. It was a way of projecting the hatred of God onto somebody else, saying it's not us, we didn't kill Jesus, it's the Jews who did it. That's what it is. It's a way of getting rid of your hatred, pawning it off on somebody else. But that's what it is. And when I say it's a Democrat problem, I mean it's a Democrat problem now. It is not consigned either to the left or the right, but that's not what we're talking about. There's plenty of anti-Semites on the right, plenty on the left, but we're talking about political parties and people with power, people who are elected, who are serving in government. That's what we're talking about. The Republicans don't have this problem. The Democrats do. So here is the guy, Elliot Engel, the congressman who heads the Foreign Affairs Committee and who's writing this condemnation that they can't pass. And he's on CNN and basically he goes mealy mouth. It's not about anti-Semitism. It's about any hatred anywhere. No, it's not. But he says it is.
You're the chairman of a really important committee, right? Foreign Affairs. This is the center of a lot. And it's certainly the center of this discussion about Israel. At what point do you say to her, Congresswoman Omar, look, you're not on this committee anymore. You strip her of your seat. Are you close to that or at that point?
No, I'm not close to it. First of all, it's not up to me. This is done by the leadership. I don't know that would do anything except exacerbate the situation even more. I'm looking to get rid of anti-Semitism, not looking to punish anybody. I think that it's very important that we keep our eye on the prize. And I think that whenever there is hatred being spewed, or again, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, Islamophobia, I think we have to speak out, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to say that it's this person. You know, if you want to get rid of anti-Semitism, one way to do it is to expel anti-Semites from your committee. I mean, and he doesn't want to say it's a problem. It's a problem in Islam. It's a problem in leftism. It has been a problem in leftism for a long time. It is built into leftism because leftism is anti-West. It is anti-freedom. It's anti-West. It's anti-spirituality. It's anti-Christian spirituality specifically because that is the heart of Westernism. You cannot believe the feature that the New York Times ran next to its story about how the Democrats can't get around to condemning anti-Semitism. It is unbelievable. Here's the story the New York Times runs next to the fact that the new left Democrats won't reject anti-Semitism. They will not do it. They will not do it. They may mouth it, but they will not really do it. So what's the issue, right? This is obviously what journalism does. Journalism extracts the issue that they want, because journalists are now so biased, so intellectually corrupt, so one-sided, they only extract the issue they think should be there. So if an Islamist goes into a bar and shoots it up, the problem is guns, not Islam. Right? That's the issue. The issue is then guns. If a right-winger goes into a bar and shoots it up, the problem is conservatism. You know, that's the way it works. They extract the issue. So what's the issue? What is the issue that the New York Times sees in the Democrats' inability to pass a simple resolution condemning anti-Semitism and maybe tossing Ilhan Omar off the Foreign Affairs Committee where she should not be? Okay, here's the headline. Ilhan Omar's criticism raises the question, is AIPAC too powerful? This is the Israeli PAC, right? This is the pro-Israeli PAC. That's the question. Is AIPAC too powerful? Miss Omar's, I'm reading this now, Miss Omar's insinuation that money fuels American support for Israel, it's all about the Benjamins, baby, she wrote, revived a fraught debate in Washington. Unbelievable. Not over whether this person should be kicked off a committee. It revived a fraught debate in Washington over whether the pro-Israel lobbying behemoth has too much sway over American policy in the Middle East. The backlash to Ms. Omar's tweet was fierce, with even Democratic leaders accusing her of trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes. The Congresswoman apologized, but the swirling debate, not only around Ms. Omar, but also around broader currents buffeting the Middle East, has forced an uncomfortable re-examination of the questions that she has raised. Well, good for her for raising these questions about whether Jews have too much money, whether Jews are secretly influencing, foreign policy. No one ever thought of that before. Good for her for raising that wonderful anti-Semitic question. Has AIPAC, this is again from the Times, has AIPAC, founded more than 50 years ago to strengthen, protect, and promote the U.S.-Israeli relationship, become too powerful? And with that power, has AIPAC warped the policy debate over Israel so drastically that dissenting voices are not even allowed to be heard? Shame on the New York Times. If there is such a thing as a person at the New York Times who can continue to feel shame, shame on them. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. That's a newspaper that isn't even fit to line a canary cage. A canary wouldn't see fit to crap on that paper. That is a terrible thing to do. It is IPAC isn't even, it's a big PAC. It's a real PAC. They don't contribute to candidates. They don't give any money to candidates. They are fighting for a relationship with our allies, the only country in the Middle East that shares our values, the only one, and the only one that the left sees fit to want to boycott and divest and sell. That is an amazing, amazing piece of anti-Semitic writing. Shame on them. It is just amazing to me. Let's listen. Listen to Chuck Todd. Here you can see the argument played out and what's so wrong with it.
Omar opened the door for Republicans to point fingers and say, aha, the left has a problem with anti-Semitism. And you know what? It does. But unless you want to forget the chance of Jews will not replace us by neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, unless you want to forget President Trump saying there were good people on both sides of that debate, unless you want to forget the synagogue slaughter in Pittsburgh last year, unless you want to forget all of that, you have to acknowledge that the right has a problem with anti-Semitism too. Both sides are doing a lot of finger pointing, and there's a lot to point to. And that's sad. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. On the left, it's on the rise. On the right, it's on the rise. In Europe and a lot of other places. So let's not pretend it's on the rise in just the other political party.
Left and right are not political parties. Left and right are not political parties. They are political positions. And it is true on the far left and on the far right, or as they now call it, the alt-right, which I think is more fair because it's an alternative to actual American conservatism. It's not American conservatism. But let's just divide the world into left and right. On the far left and on the far right, there is anti-Semitism. Listen to who he compared. This is a congresswoman. This is a woman in the halls of American power. And so are all these other people, these Farrakhan lovers hanging out with him. He's comparing them to the guys with tiki torches or wiki torch, whatever the hell they're called, marching in the streets, these white supremacist garbage heads. He's comparing a congresswoman to them. He's comparing a congresswoman to the guy who shot up a synagogue. Really? Really? That's the right and the left? Our right-wing anti-Semites are the outsiders of the outsiders of the outsiders, the furthest away from the people in power. Is there any relationship between Mitch McConnell and the guy who shot up that synagogue? No, of course there's not. And their guys are in Congress. Their guys are arguing. Their guys are at the New York Times writing front page stories about whether the Jews are too powerful. That's a ridiculous comparison. And he throws in that canard about Trump saying there were good people on both sides. He was obviously talking about the statue controversy. It was a stupid, tone-deaf comment, but it was not anti-Semitic, and it was not supporting white supremacy. That is just crap. If it were supporting it, somebody would have asked him, do you mean that? But nobody has ever asked him, does he mean it? Because that's not obviously what he was talking about. That's ridiculous. It is ridiculous, and they're doing it to run interference for a Democrat Party and a left-wing philosophy that has become by nature infested with anti-Semitism. Barry Weiss is a writer. I think she's a writer at the Times, though she's constantly under fire because she's not woke enough. But she's been writing a lot about this. And she and her dad, Lou Weiss, attended the synagogue that got shot up. So it had a big effect on her. And Barry was on The View, and she was saying the same thing. It's on the right and on the left. But she did talk about the way it slips under the guise of progressive politics. This is cut number 2.
As you said, when you see people marching with tiki torches or you hear the Pittsburgh killer writing on social media, all Jews must die, that's very obviously eliminationist. The problem with anti-Semitism from the far left is that it oftentimes is smuggled into the mainstream under the guise of progressive values. So it says about itself, I'm just standing up for the downtrodden Palestinians, which they are. I am just standing up for justice. I'm standing against racism. And so that kind of language is a siren song, including to Jews, 75% of whom vote for Democrats. And so that's the problem with it, is that it's not as easy to spot, oftentimes because it says we're just about criticizing Israel. In the case of
Nancy Pelosi shut it down?
Nancy Pelosi shut it down very aggressively with Ilhan Omar. The problem is that she still has a spot on the
Right.
Congressional Foreign Affairs Committee. And that's a real question.
See, I would go even further. I think as the party moves left, it moves into anti-Semitism land. Whenever you're against freedom, whenever you're against the human person, as when you want to leave babies to die if they escape your abortion, whenever you're against the dignity and freedom of the individual, you are going to ultimately be against the Jews. This anti-Semitism, it is the devil's flagpole. It is when you see it waving, you know who's living there. And it is on the left, on the right, but right now, it's the Democrat Party that represents the furthest extreme of its own philosophy. Michael Goodwin, writing in the New York Post, says it's no coincidence that the Democratic Party is increasingly both the anti-Israel party and home to a growing number of anti-Semites. To be clear, the two things are not always the same, but something is going on when both are defining elements of a political organization. One obvious truth is that Dems have failed to deal with anti-Semitism forthrightly and now are confronted by a metastasizing cancer in their ranks. Another development was Obama's effort to lure Iran in from the pariah state cold, despite its vow to eliminate Israel. By the way, this does go back to Obama. Obama, for 20 years, went to the church of the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, who was, what's the name? Christian Liberation Theory, which has been infested with anti-Semitism. He's the guy who, Obama the other day, there are times when I miss Obama just because I love the absurdity of the guy's ego. Obama and Michelle were making a speech the other day, and Obama said, if we could form a network of young leaders, not just in the United States and around the world, then we got something. If we can train 1 million Baracks and Michelles who are running around thinking they can change the world, that would be great. I mean, I thought, I have nightmares like that, where you look out the window and there's 1 million Baracks and Michelles out there. He loves himself. This guy sat for 20 years, right? 20 years of Sundays in the Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church. This is the guy who called Israel an illegal state. This is the guy who used that old joke, Jesus was a Palestinian. Jesus was not a Palestinian. Palestine is the Anglicization is actually the Latinization of the word Philistine. Remember Goliath, the Philistines, who the Jews were always fighting when the Romans wiped out the Jews in 70 AD, I think it was. They renamed the territory Palestine as just a way of giving them the finger, basically, a way of telling the Jews what for. Jesus was a Jew. He was a Jew. That is how you know what Jesus was. His entire philosophy, his entire insight comes from being the son of the God of the Jews. Remember, I think I've told that story, my favorite story about John Wayne on his deathbed, where they were always saying Wayne was an anti-Semite and one of his visitors was a Jew, and the guy said, "Oh, I wouldn't think you'd want to see him, Duke, because he's a Jew," joking around. And Duke pointed at the ceiling and he said, "The only Jew I don't want to see right now is that one," because he didn't want to die. That's the Jew that Jesus was, that Jesus came from. All of his philosophy, everything he quoted came from the Old Testament. This is part of leftism. It is part of leftism because leftism is now anti-Western. It is anti-freedom. It is the individual. It is anti all the things that come into our culture through the God of the Jews, because he is God. Because he is God. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That thing in the New York Times, if I believed in burning words, that would be a good way to start a fire.